Hi, scholars. In this video, I want to talk to you about interpersonal needs. Now, each of us have kind of a paradox of sorts. We have a need for independence and a need for companionship, or our interpersonal needs. The need for independence, when we're independent, all of our resources get to be focused exactly on what we want. Resources, not only money, but our time and our attention. It's often said that attention is the most valuable thing that you can give to somebody. And when you're independent, when you're alone, all of your attention gets to be given exactly to what you are interested in. Versus our interpersonal needs. Our interpersonal needs is our need for companionship with other people, friends or whatever. Now, if we have an overly developed need for independence, in other words, our need for independence is very high and our need for interpersonal is very low, it makes forming deep relationships very difficult, because we can form a relationship, but we really don't want to give up our independence. We don't want to share our attention. We don't want to share our time as much to things that we are not interested in. If we have an overly developed interpersonal needs, then it becomes very difficult to make healthy relationships because we lack that sense of independence. We lack that part of ourself in the relationship. So having a good balance, and I'm not saying that, I've ever seen research that said what percent it should be, so I'm not saying 50-50 in each, but a good healthy balance between our desire for some independence and interpersonal needs. So the best way to understand interpersonal needs is really to understand how they're different from physical needs, because we're pretty familiar with our physical needs: food, air, water, shelter. So how are these different? They're different in 4 ways. The first way is the directness of impact. Physical needs have a very high directness of impact. If you don't eat, you get hungry, you get sick, you die. Quick and easy. Interpersonal communication, though, interpersonal needs are very indirect. Research indicates that it actually can lead to the same result. If your interpersonal needs aren't met, it can shorten your life dramatically. But it isn't so much this person died from not enough hugs. So it's more indirect. So that's one major way that they're different. The next one is predictability. Physical needs are very predictable. We can determine with mathematical precision exactly the amount of calories you need to bring in, each of the macronutrients and each of the micronutrients. With mathematical precision, they can do an evaluation of your body and determine the exact amount. We can determine the exact number of breaths you need per minute based upon things like altitude, lung capacity, etc. So we know the exact number of breaths you need to take per minute. How many hugs do you need? How much attention do you need from another person? We know with absolute certainty that you have needs, but we can't actually determine like a number. Certainly it would matter as far as the attention, who's giving you the attention. If it's somebody that you admire and respect, that's probably worth more than a complete and utter stranger. So predictability, very predictable for physical, very unpredictable for interpersonal. Third, flexibility. Interpersonal needs are very flexible, while physical needs really aren't. If you need to eat, having warmer shelter doesn't accomplish that need. Your need for calories doesn't get solved with anything but calories. So you don't have a lot of flexibility there, but with interpersonal needs, you have a lot of flexibility. And this is key. It is the flexibility in interpersonal needs that allows us to have a healthy relationship with somebody that is incompatible. And when we talk about the interpersonal needs and compatibility, we'll talk about how this flexibility allows you to manage those differences. Finally, number 4, requirement for interaction. Interpersonal needs, this is almost absolute. Your interpersonal needs largely need somebody else. So there has to be some interaction. There are very, very few examples. For physical needs, interaction is irrelevant. So like your need for calories, your body doesn't care whether you're eating alone or with somebody else. You need hydration, The body doesn't care whether you're doing that alone or with somebody else. So interaction is incredibly unimportant to your physical needs, but very important to your interpersonal needs. So before we go into the 3 interpersonal needs, I want to talk to you about the issue of compatibility. As we talk about these interpersonal needs, we're going to be talking about like the need as being high in a continuum between high and low. So compatibility, we've got 2 concepts here. First is symmetrical. When our needs are symmetrical, it says they're relatively the same. So maybe both are high, or both are in the middle, or both are low. Complementary means that our needs are relatively opposite. So one is high and the other is low. For example, they're very different from one another. So these are the 3 interpersonal needs: affection, inclusion, and control. So affection. And once again, with each of these 3, try to avoid saying, I've got that need, I don't have the other need. It's more you're on a continuum between high and low. It might feel like with one of these that you really don't have the need. And that indicates that you're very low in that need. So affection. Affection is the need to give and receive approval. It's the need to give and receive approval. So somebody who is high in need of affection, they tend to like to celebrate the success of others. If they're with somebody, they might like to hold hands. They say, I love you a lot, etc. People who are low, they tend not to do that. Rather than celebrate somebody else's success, they might mock it or ridicule it, make fun of it. It's like, oh, you got Employee of the Month. What, did everybody else quit? That sort of thing. They don't like to hold hands typically. They say I love you like once a year. They don't feel comfortable generally if people celebrate their success, or they don't feel comfortable if somebody says I love you a lot to them. They're kind of like, look, fine, ditto. I love you. I'll let you know if it changes. So for an example here, before we get to the example, which do you think is compatible? If they're symmetrical, which means they have the same level of the need, or complementary? And in this one, it's symmetrical. If they're both high in need of affection, then they tend to celebrate each other's success. They give approval, they receive approval, they like to hold hands, they like to say I love you, things like that. If they're both low, then they tend not to even tell each other about their successes. They don't generally hold hands. Again, they might say I love you once a year. They're just kind of, they might seem to outsiders as if they're aloof. The difficulty, the incompatibility, is when they're opposite, when they're complementary, where one is high and the other is low. So to illustrate this, we're going to use an example of Sandy and Robert. They're in a relationship. Sandy is high in the need, Robert is low. So in this case, Sandy is high in the need of affection, Robert is low in the need. Now, so that means Sandy likes to celebrate successes. She likes to, compliment Robert and what he accomplishes, and she wants to be complimented too. She wants to have her accomplishments celebrated. She likes to give that approval and receive it. She likes to hold hands. She likes to say, I love you, things like that. Robert really doesn't. Now, each of them are likely going to see the other one as broken. Sandy is going to see Robert as somebody that is maybe cold, aloof, uncaring, really not very good at the relationship thing. Like he doesn't know how to relate to people. Robert is going to see Sandy as being clingy or needy, being insecure. Why does she constantly need to hear I love you? She knows I love her. I told her that, back in March. So with each of them seeing the other one as broken, what they will oftentimes do is try to correct the other one or fix the other one. And the way they do this is through modeling. Sandy will try to model good behavior, teach Robert how people are supposed to relate by increasing the affection. Robert is going to try to teach Sandy that she doesn't need that by decreasing the affection. So Sandy's actually going to say, I love you more. And Robert's going to say it less. Now, who's going to win this other than neither? Oh, obviously Robert. See, Sandy saying I love you to Robert might give him a little bit of annoyance, but it doesn't hurt him. Robert withholding affection to Sandy actually causes pain. So by nature, humans are pleasure seekers and pain avoiders. So Sandy at some point is going to think, fine, if he won't show affection, I won't. If he doesn't say I love you to me, then I won't say it to him. What does Robert think? Good. Robert thinks the problem's solved. Sandy's no longer needing to hear I love you. He thinks that Sandy's been fixed, that she's no longer insecure, she's no longer clingy or needy or any of the other terms that people like to use for it. Sandy's need for affection is still there. It's just being suppressed. It's being buried. And because of the pain associated with that, oftentimes we try to numb it. Here's the thing. If you have 3 needs and one of them is not being met, the unmet need is the only one you're going to pay attention to. It's like my guess is right now none of you are thinking about air. But if air was suddenly in short supply, it would be the only thing you're thinking about. If you're well fed, you don't really think about your need for food. It's when it's not being met, when you're hungry, that's when you think of it. So Robert might meet her needs for inclusion and control. They're satisfied, but because this is the need not being met, this is the need she focuses more and more on. Till one day, maybe a couple weeks later, Sandy's at work and she wins Employee of the Month. And one of her coworkers, we'll call this person Steve, just as a random name, Steve says, gosh, that's great. I always knew that you should be the Employee of the Month. You deserve it. And all of a sudden, Sandy is like a starving person kind of almost entering a buffet. It's this approval. And so she starts talking to him and showing him approval, and he's high in need of affection also, so he eats that up, and they begin to give each other exactly what they need. Now, there's nothing romantic between the two. Neither of them would even consider something romantic. It's that each of them have a need that is not being met elsewhere, and all of a sudden they're getting it met from each other at work. And boy, 5 o'clock comes in a snap, and it's time to go home. Now Sandy gets to go to Robert. Now we are naturally drawn to what gives us energy, and cognitive stimulation, such as our needs being met, that gives us energy. So we're naturally drawn to that. She's naturally drawn to having this need that she's starving with being met. So she goes to Robert. The next morning she gets to come home, or go back to work, excuse me. Next morning she comes and she's probably actually excited to get there. She gets there and her and Steve pick up right where they left off. Maybe while they're talking, the phone rings, the cell phone, Sandy looks at it and it's Robert. Now, we're naturally drawn to what gives us energy. We tend not to like things that take energy away. Why would she leave what is giving her energy so she can talk to somebody that takes it away? Now, she doesn't intend to ignore Robert. She loves Robert. Robert meets all of her other needs, except this one. So she goes, well, I'll call him later. She puts the phone away. And they continue. Maybe the boss comes out and says, listen, everybody, we got a big project coming up. I don't want to make this mandatory overtime, but we need some people to be willing to work a little late. And their hands shoot up. They volunteer. Eventually, Sandy is heading to her car, and she goes, oh, I was supposed to call Robert. Well, I'll talk to him when I get home. And they get home, and what happens when Robert finds out about Steve? In all likelihood, Robert's going to think that Sandy is cheating on him. When really the reason is because she has a basic need that Robert refused to meet. And again, it could be that Robert met every other need, but this one. Robert doesn't recognize that he's not meeting this need because he thought he fixed it. He thought she's been cured. She doesn't have this need anymore. When in actuality, it's the strongest need that she has. The way to deal with this goes back to the flexibility. That Robert and Sandy can have a very, very healthy relationship, but recognize that Sandy does need somebody to say, I love you. So Robert saying, I love you, is that really asking that much of him? Or If Sandy has other groups of friends that she hangs out with and they show her affection, maybe not saying I love you, although maybe, but oh, that's great that you won Employee of the Month. We should have a little party, or let's go out for drinks or whatever. If Robert doesn't want to participate, he doesn't have to. But the flexibility in our needs can actually help us be able to manage those relationships. Next, inclusion. Inclusion is the need to include others and to be included by others. People who are high in need of inclusion tend to be extroverted. They like to hang out with groups. If they're going to do something, they generally invite others. And when others are going to do something, they kind of have a certain expectation that they'll be invited. People who are low in need of inclusion, they tend to be more introverted. They'd really rather kind of not invite other people. They prefer to have quality time, as they'll call it, alone time with their partner. So in this case, which one would be compatible? Symmetrical, where they're the same, or complementary, where they're different? Complementary. If they're both high in need of inclusion, then they both hang out with the group a lot. So they're always inviting their friends along. If they're low in need of inclusion, then if your friend is low in need of inclusion with somebody else is low in need of inclusion, you might see them occasionally at the grocery store. But for the most part, they don't participate in group events. It's when they're incompatible. So going back to the example, Sandy's high in need of inclusion, Robert's low in need of inclusion. Once again, they see each other as broken. Sandy sees Robert perhaps as being boring and such. Robert sees Sandy as saying that there's something wrong in the relationship. Why do we need all these people around? So they both try to fix the other. Sandy believes if Robert could just experience how much fun it is to hang out with a group, then he'll start to loosen up a little bit more and become more fun. He'll want to hang out with the group more. So she's actually going to increase the amount of times that she invites the group. Robert, on the other hand, wants to teach Sandy that the two of us alone is enough. And so he's going to try to reduce the amount of time the group is involved. So who's going to win this one? Robert again. Robert may not be able to convince Sandy not to invite friends over, but he can convince them not to want to come. So let's say Sandy invites a group of friends over and they're going to have dinner and play cards or watch a movie or whatever. Robert just sits there glowering at them, clearly not happy they're there. Sandy eventually gets up to go check on dinner. One of the friends looks at Robert and is like, "So, Robert, how's everything going?" Robert goes, "Well, work's going fine, but honestly, I like to spend time with my wife, but unfortunately, my friends can't seem to get a hint. How's your day going?" Have you ever been over at somebody's house and it's clear that they're fighting? You don't want to be there. So through his just down in the mouth, glowering attitude, not really, responding to anybody, not engaged, clearly doesn't want them there, he can make them not want to be there. So once again, the need that isn't being met is the need that gets all the attention. And so Sandy seeks that someplace else. And again, this can actually be managed, the flexibility here. It's okay for Sandy to have a group of friends and to hang out with them. There might be times that Robert doesn't actually want Sandy there, to where he could be able to do those projects, or maybe he's got one or two friends he wants to hang out with. So managing it through the flexibility is really the way to manage this incompatibility, rather than trying to fight and try to fix the other one. Finally, the last interpersonal need is control. This is really the need to make the final decision. It's the need to have the final say. And the need for control is linked to an overdeveloped sense of responsibility. That when somebody is high in need of control, they typically believe they're going to be blamed if things go wrong, and therefore they want to be the one to make the decision. They oftentimes believe that they have the best chance to make the right call, to make the right decision. People who are low in need of control really don't want that responsibility. So they won't naturally hold themselves responsible if things go wrong, and they would rather not be the one to blame. So they're okay with somebody else making that choice. So again, which would be more compatible? If they're symmetrical, the same, or complementary, the opposite? And in this case, it's complementary. If one is high in need of control and the other's low, they're compatible on that. The person who is high in need of control makes the decisions. The person low in control doesn't have the responsibility of it. So if Sandy is high in need of control and Robert is low, Sandy makes the choices. She's the one that is in control. It's when they're both high or both low that conflict begins to emerge. If they're both low in need of control, it's very difficult for them to make a decision. They're like, so what do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. We could go out to eat. Notice that's not a committed thing. It's not saying we should go out to eat. It's really wide open. That way, if it's a bad idea, hey, I didn't say we should. I just said we could. They go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, can't make a decision. Okay. People who are high in need of control, each of them make their individual decision and then fight over it. And then oftentimes it ends up where whoever's choice is followed, anything that goes wrong, the other one is real quick to beat them up about it. So those are the three interpersonal needs. Again, it's a continuum and looking at compatibility. I made this little table here. I would recommend drawing something like this in your notes. You can go and pause the video and put this here. And basically, it just shows like affection, symmetrical is compatible, inclusion, symmetrical, control, complementary. On the test, there's a lot of questions like, is symmetrical or complementary needs compatible in this particular need class? And that way you've got this and it'll give you the answer. And it's a good thing to know. So thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you for your attention, and I will see you in the next video.